Hello, all. We'll give folks 1 minute more, maybe, to file in. We still see the numbers climbing up a bit. But I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Josh Hadro. I'm the managing director of the IIIF Consortium. You'll hear from myself and my two colleagues, Caitlin and Glenn, later today and the rest of this week. I do want to say up top at the beginning that thank you for joining us. This is the Newcomer session. This is really meant as an introduction to IIIF, to the technology, to the community, to the consortium. This is really meant for newcomers. If you've seen IIIF presentations before, this will be covering a lot of the same ground. If you are just interested in the plenary and the community updates, that'll actually start at the top of the next hour. Oh, someone can't hear me. Is anyone else? Am I?
Josh, I can hear you. I'll work on the background, see if we can troubleshoot.
Perfect. Thanks, Caitlin. Well, I will press onward, but just wanted to stress that point. So if if you're here for the plenary, that it starts the next hour, but by all means, you're welcome to join us. But this is really geared toward newcomers, and so it'll really start from the beginning. And so the intention here is to kick off the IIIF Working and Learning meeting with this introductory session, go over the basics, and then we'll get into lots more interesting materials related to IIIF later today, and throughout the rest of this week. So the intention here with this session is, as the title indicates, to go over the basics, to really start from the beginning, to introduce you to IIIF, to show you a number of examples, and then to talk a bit about how it works, how the community structures work, and how we are able to evolve and adapt to interesting and new and important use cases. So what I will do is talk for about 35 minutes. We'll have a bit of time for questions if there are any about kind of the basics here. And then we're going to make sure to leave a bit of a break before the community update section, which, as I said, starts at the top of the next hour. So I think with that introduction out of the way, I think we have a solid crew here, and as we discussed in the chat, this is being recorded and will be uploaded to the IIIF YouTube channel following this. So if you have colleagues who can't make it here and now, look out for that link, and we'll share those online. But why don't we get into it? So what is IIIF? If you're here, you've certainly heard of it. Maybe you've been at a conference, maybe you've heard this acronym, maybe you've read it somewhere. Let's start at the very top. It's this. It stands for the International Image Interoperability Framework. And because that is a lot to say, you'll usually hear us abbreviate it as IIIF. And it means that set of things. But maybe more importantly, what does it actually mean conceptually? So IIIF is this. It's a model for presenting and annotating digitized materials, specifically images and audio-visual files. And because it is an open technology standard, there's also a lot of other benefits that accrue to that model of presenting these things. But it's also critical. We always stress the fact that whenever we're talking about IIIF, we're also very much referring to the global community of people who make this work. So not just the software developers and implementers, but also the folks working with the collections, the photographers, the metadata staffers, the educators, all these people who are touching digitized collections at different points in the life cycle. All of those people have a place in the IIIF community. And so that's very much what we're talking about when we talk about IIIF, as much as it is also a way of talking about and transmitting digital objects. And so when we're talking about that community, this is what we're talking about too. It's a global community that's grown tremendously in recent years. So IIIF really started just over 10 years ago. And this was kind of our largest gathering just before the pandemic. In June of 2019, we got close to 300 people in a medieval lecture hall in Germany to talk about IIIF, to talk about best practices, to expand the community groups that help make these things work. And so this is a kind of a lovely picture. It was also the hottest day on record, I believe, in history in Germany. But even through all that, people came together and wanted to compare notes on IIIF. And this is another view of that community that we're talking about. So these are the implementations that we know about. There are surely dots missing on this map, but we really love to see the fact that this has really become a global concern. IIIF started out in North America and in the UK and in Europe, and you can see densities there. But every week and every month, we're learning about new implementations at museums and universities and national libraries all over the place. And so you can see the set of dots that represents those implementations. And the red dots are just places that we know about that have implemented IIIF, and the blue dots are actually formal members of the IIIF Consortium. So institutions that believe strongly enough in this shared open technology that they help financially support the work that we do to spread the word and to add even more global diversity to this map. This is another view just of some of the places, the kinds of places where IIIF has taken root and is really being aggressively developed. So it started out very much in universities and research institutions, state and national libraries, but also increasingly moving into lots of other domains, so museums and galleries, as well as aggregators. I'll talk a little bit about the Internet Archive in the next hour, but places like Europeana, DPLA, the Wikimedia Foundation, increasingly using things like IIIF to connect users to the materials and cultural heritage organizations. And as I said, it started in libraries, really started with medieval manuscripts and rare books and wanting to share high resolution images of those materials, but it's expanded tremendously beyond that. So museums digitizing their collections and using it for guided storytelling, scholars and academics in other parts of universities using it in teaching and instruction. We're even seeing stories of high school classes using IIIF to do lessons about local geography. Elements of digital humanities. Also, IIIF wasn't designed for artificial intelligence or machine learning, but it is very useful for making those projects more efficient. We're seeing use cases in STEM, so bioinformatics, life sciences, medical imaging, things like that. All of these different cases are where IIIF adds value. But maybe stepping back a second, why do we need something like IIIF? Why are all these places adopting it? So if you are on this call, if you've heard about IIIF, if you've gone to cultural heritage conferences and thought about this, you probably have an intuitive sense that digitizing materials is such an important way of transmitting important aspects of our own cultures, of learning about the cultures of those around us, of other cultures in the world and in the places where we live and work. The digitization of these materials is such a critical means of communicating these different aspects. So that's why we've been doing this for more than a generation. We've been reformatting materials, putting them online, putting so much effort into metadata and access mechanisms to make those available. And that's amazing and that's heroic work. But we've also created a major problem for ourselves when in doing that. So all these institutions put so much energy and time into digitizing and putting things online, but we also invented this problem for ourselves, the problem of silos. So all these different institutions, all these different organizations putting digital collections on the web, but then basically making users learn a different kind of interface or a different set of interfaces every time they have to traverse those institutional boundaries. So IIIF is really meant, in one sense, as a way of addressing that silo problem. And so what I want to do now for a good chunk of this is just show you examples. The best way we've learned to talk about IIIF is to show IIIF. So these are all real examples from real institutions that are making use of IIIF. And we'll start kind of at the most basic use case. So IIIF is really good at this idea of presenting a very high resolution image and letting users get to the very fine-grained detail without having to download this massive multi-gigabyte image. So this example comes from Stanford. We love using this. So this is a giant map, and the person you see on the right side there is the photographer who helped oversee the digitization of this. And that guy is 6 feet tall. So that means that this map is 12 feet tall by about 18 feet wide. So just an enormous asset, object to digitize, but using IIIF, it allows people to get right in there and see all the detail of this tax map you were meant to stand in the middle of and read the notations around you. But with that deep zoom, there's also a lot of other capability that you want to come along with it. So this idea of comparison, comparing images. This is an example from the Getty in Los Angeles. So they did an amazing exhibition of Ed Ruscha photography of Sunset Boulevard. So there are all these different images across the decades. And so these are examples from 1965, 1975, 1985, and then 2007. The same street corner taken, images taken across those years. So not only can you compare these, but because these are IIIF images, you can then really zoom in on the details of just this ultra close crop of these 4 images of the same billboard across almost 50, 60 years. You can see the evolution of the ads just in this one intersection. So you can see in 65, we were going from billboards of vodka to in 2007, billboards of Coca-Cola. So just one example of how they're making use of that deep zoom comparison aspect. But that comparison aspect also can be applied in other interesting ways. So this is called multispectral imaging. This comes from the Leiden collection, and it allows you to see or to compare that deep zoom experience with comparison across the visual spectrum, the X-ray spectrum, infrared, to be able to see the elements that underlie this painting that aren't visual, that aren't apparent in the visual spectrum. And a comparison and presentation across sites. So this is kind of a core IIIF use case, a very illuminating one, pardon the pun. But this is an illuminated manuscript from the 15th century that had the illustrations cut out of it. And they're literally held by 2 separate institutions at this point. And as far as raw distance goes, these aren't all that far apart. But as far as digital experience goes, these might as well be in different dimensions. But the Biblissima group in France was able to reunify these using IIIF because they were digitized and served using IIIF. They were able to reunify these, so reconnect them to the original page position where they were meant to be seen, and then still allow that deep zoom. So allowing end users to have this online experience that as closely as possible replicates that experience of being able to work with and look at the physical object there. So reunification using IIIF there. And a lot of this is accomplished through something called annotation. So this is an example from Harvard's edX course on cell biology. This allows the annotation of this very high resolution image. And in this case, it's annotation that is using educational materials and describing what's happening at different levels of zoom within this cell biology context. So really helping the learner there be able to engage with this and understand the scale of what's happening with different biology components. And that annotation capability is also critical to things like crowdsourcing. So this example comes from the National Library of Wales, where they set up a crowdsourcing task and an interface that asks folks in Wales to help identify contributors or to identify people who might be listed in these images, as well as to identify, using annotation connection, the location where the photograph might have been taken. So all of this stored as what's called a IIIF annotation. And then annotations can then be used for end user display. So this is an example of what we call guided storytelling. This comes from an organization in Italy called MLOL. This is a guided storytelling example of materials related to Dante. So taking the IIIF materials, drawing people's attention to specific points of interest, but then still allowing the end user to navigate those images and browse on their own, and then get back on the rails and continue the guided storytelling experience. And another example of this comes from this Harvard exhibit on slavery, abolition, emancipation, and freedom. They used something called exhibit.so to do something similar, but it's embedded within the context of their presentation of all these digitized materials. So it allows the users to explore the materials, but then also to take the annotated guided tour through them and be shown the points of attention that the experts who put this together at Harvard wanted to draw out of the materials. And that same concept of annotation also feeds into this relatively new set of capabilities around mapping. So annotations can be used to help do something called georectification. And this is a tool called AllMaps. using a new element of annotation format developed for IIIF just in this past year. You can see here it allows people to place historical maps on top of digitized maps like Google Maps or OpenStreetMaps, and then you can see by changing the transparency, you can see how the evolution of landscapes and this particular riverside industrial area has developed over those decades, and you can compare all sorts of maps together and see how land usage has changed and evolved in the urban landscape. And this goes beyond just images. So we've focused largely on images, which is where IIIF got its start. But IIIF, as of the last few years, has also been able to incorporate audio and moving image materials into that same set of frameworks. So this is an example. I'll play this video, and it has audio along with it. That is a presentation of a really important oral history archive from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. About some wildfires that were very destructive. And so this is using IIIF to allow people to navigate the transcripts of these oral histories, and to be able to actually work their way through and find different spots and search for keywords and questions within the transcripts. And I'll play this, and you'll get a sense of how that's coming together.
People.
So what's a typical day like for you at the vet clinic?
Well, I would start by saying like no day is predictable because of the nature of my job. With emergency medicine, it's just kind of hard you just never really know what's going to come in the door. Technicians who are equivalent to nurses.
So as you know, this project is focused.
And so that's just one example of a number of AV examples that have come into the IIIF community in recent years. Because it is all based on this open standard and open set of specifications, a lot of it is portable. That's the interoperability. That's the part of IIIF. So we love this example. This comes from something called the Indigenous Digital Archive, which took a lot of materials, recontextualized a lot of materials from the National Archives in the US that were related to the Indian boarding schools and the disruption of indigenous peoples in the 19th and 20th centuries in the US. And so they presented these documents in a IIIF viewer that you can see here, but they also offered users the ability to open them up in different viewers. You can see down there at the bottom, it says try a different viewer, and it gives links to open the same objects in the universal viewer or the mirror door viewer for comparison. It allows that flexibility and that ability for users to then take the materials and then do other things with them. And so that gives you hopefully a sense of how IIIF is being used and some of the possibility in the space. And as I said at the beginning, it's really meant to address that problem of silos. So in the context of a single institution, you can see here, this is really meant as a normalization layer that helps you take care of common tasks and common things you want to do with those digitized objects. But part of where IIIF really sings is in this context. Across institutional boundaries. So when you have a really thriving ecosystem of institutions that are making use of IIIF, all of a sudden these different tasks and capabilities and user interactions become much more possible. Drawing materials from a number of different institutions and then bringing them into annotation or transcription tools, bringing them into new search environments, doing all of this just using this relatively simple notion of a IIIF manifest for a digitized object. And so I won't go too deep into the technical elements of this. If you're interested, we have a lot of material online and training courses where we can give you a lot more depth into the APIs. But I do want to mention how the APIs work because I think it helps illuminate how we make this standard work together. So IIIF is really premised on these two core APIs. We have the image API and then the presentation API. The image API delivers the pixels, basically delivering the visual aspect of that image. And then that works hand in hand with the presentation API, which delivers things like structure and metadata just enough of that to drive a really elegant and useful viewing experience. The best way to illustrate this is to show you how an image, this comes from the Art Institute of Chicago, but this is an example of how a museum is using this. So this is a IIIF view of a sketchbook that they present on their website. And what I've highlighted in blue here is what's delivered by the image API. So this is the deep zoom of these sketches. And then down at the bottom, that thumbnail strip, that order of the pages is delivered by the presentation API. So those two things work together in this interface to present this, this object to the end user. And this is another view of a different object. So this is some photographs of different views of an object, the Laucon. And this is another IIIF viewer called Clover. And in this viewer, you can see I've highlighted in blue the elements delivered by the image API. So that's the deep zoom elements and the thumbnails. And then the order of the objects and the metadata associated with it, or what are being presented by the presentation API. So those two things working together in this example from the Clover viewer. There are 4 other APIs. I won't go into too much depth about these, but these are part of the IIIF ecosystem. We have the content search API, which essentially allows, if you have transcription or OCR or translation, it allows you to do things kind of like searching within a PDF for a IIIF object. We have something called authorization flow, which allows for differentiating access if only logged in users or staffers should be able to get the most high resolution asset. You can do things like that with authorization flow. The content state API allows you to link to complex views of an object. It allows you to use annotations and link to a particular view, say a particular highlight that you want to make to end users. And then change discovery is really geared toward aggregators. So places like Europeana, DPLA, and others who might be able to take whole collections and be able to harvest those and just understand which are the most recently updated IIIF items within those collections. So in the last section here, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the community and the consortium that help evolve, that help all these different use cases come together and then translate those into the work of the IIIF specifications. And so this is the community landscape, sort of a constellation of different of groups. And so you can see there's a lot that goes into the IIIF ecosystem and community. There's the consortium that helps try to bring all these threads together. We're working with subject experts and technical groups and institutional adopters and all the different people making these things work at the institutional level, and then working with vendors and the software developers who are then incorporating those into their digital asset management systems and all these other tools and mechanisms. And the first thing I will talk a little bit about is the IIIF Community. This is our name for the different people and volunteers and co-chairs who bring different interests to the IIIF work. So we have a number of community groups I'll mention. We also have hands-on technical specification groups that are actually charged with working on new elements of the IIIF ecosystem. And then we have some governance mechanisms, the editors who are the ones who actually write the specifications, and the coordinating committee, which represents the interests of different aspects of the community. So right now, in terms of community groups, we have a group around 3D, if you're interested in 3D objects and how that might work in IIIF. We have a very new group around AI and machine learning and how that connects to IIIF. We have an audio-visual group that looks at those new and interesting use cases around bringing AV materials into digital collections. We have a new group that's just about to form that we'll hear more about in the next hour around educators and the classroom, so pedagogical uses of IIIF and how to get beyond just sort of implementations, but actually extending out to the rest of the university and educational settings. We have a group around maps and geographic materials. We have a group that highlights the excellent work developing IIIF in museum collections and around museum storytelling and education. Then we have a group dedicated to outreach that helps us spread the word and do trainings and accomplish other things related to IIIF, particularly in lots of different languages. We also have these technical groups. As I said, these are charged with formally working on new areas of the IIIF specifications. So right now we have a group working on 3D, how to incorporate 3D and align that with 2D objects. We have groups working on the content search API that I mentioned, as well as authorization flow and how to update those for modern web browser uses. We also have a group that is in the process of forming, it isn't official yet, but a group around RTI. So if you're familiar with that, that's raked lighting and other kinds of ways of using different spectral or different imaging processes to present details of images. So that's the kind of group that form into TSGs. And then supporting all of this is the IIIF Consortium. So I mentioned that there are a set of institutions that believe strongly enough in these goals and in this mission that they financially support the work that we do. So right now there are 67 institutions that help us do this, and it supports the staff role. So myself, my two colleagues, Caitlin and Glenn. It also provides governance and oversight around the funding that we have available to help us support the mission of IIIF. So we have an executive committee and an operating committee that helps us plan our day-to-day work, week to week, month to month. And it also oversees something called the Technical Review Committee, which is a representative body and has community representatives as well, that vets every technical development in the IIIF world. It also vets what we call cookbook recipes. So the official set of best practices all go through the Technical Review Committee. And I mentioned that the IIIF Consortium supports these different community and technical groups. We plan our in-person annual conference, our online meeting that you're attending now. We go after grants to support different project work. We help oversee that cookbook that I mentioned. We also do lots and lots of training. We'll talk a lot about the training opportunities in the next hour. We're very grateful to our consortium members because that allows us to give out travel scholarships, to give event support, to bring people in the community together, so that we can make sure that the right people are in the room to make useful progress on the IIIF specifications. So I really urge you, if you're at this meeting, if you found it useful, if you're already finding this so many ideas of how this can be useful to your institution, I urge you to start talking about joining the consortium. We have a couple of different levels that make that possible. And as I said, every new member that joins the consortium makes it possible for us to really activate that energy and really spread it around the world and make better use of it. So it really helps us, as I said, deliver more trainings in more languages and present as many resources as we can to as many different people around the world as we can. So I urge you to think about joining a consortium if that's within the means of your institution. And so in the last few minutes here, I just want to leave you with a couple of pointers to ways to get started. Obviously, the online meeting is a great way to get a view into the latest developments. So the lightning talks that'll be happening after the next session, we have lightning talks on each day of this online conference. Those are obviously an amazing way to see how some of the active institutions within the community are making use of IIIF and developing it and bringing together cutting edge use cases and interfaces. But if you really just want to get handle on the beginnings of this, I urge you to start at our Getting Started page. So you can see the URL there, iiif.io/getstarted. And we've really tried to present a variety of different resources here, not just for developers. Obviously, there is a very technical aspect of the IIIF ecosystem. We have a lot of resources for those developers and people working with software and implementing those things in software. But we also increasingly have a lot of resources geared toward either end users or the kinds of staffers at institutions who work directly with the end users. So librarians, museum educators, lots of other places, lots of other folks. And providing resources to help you talk to your end users, whether that's faculty or researchers or whoever that might be. So we have a lot of resources there on the website, and we also have what are called guides at guides.iiif.io. That's a good companion resource there as well. And if you're interested in getting a little bit more hands-on, we also have a lot of training opportunities. So you can see the URL there, so training.iiif.io. We think it's really critical to offer open training materials. So essentially every bit of training that we've developed at the IIIFC staff, or we've worked with others to develop over the years, is available through this training site. So you can see a lot of training materials, and they're really meant to be self-guided options if you want to just kind of follow along the steps and learn how some of these APIs work, some of the nuts and bolts of the APIs work. But we also offer guided trainings. So if you find that you work better in kind of a cohort context, you find it just helpful to have an instructor that you can ask questions to directly and in the moment. We offer a number of those in a given year. So we did about 7 of these cohorts in 2023. You can find links to future guided trainings on that website as well. There is a training still happening next week. The last one of the year is happening next week, this December. But we also will put online soon a number of trainings through the beginning of 2024 as well. So as I said, the guided instructor-led training option available to you, but all of the training materials we have are also openly accessible to you to follow at your own pace. You can see there. So what are the next steps for you beyond those getting started resources? You are in the right place. The best next step, I think, is for you to stay with us this week. We have, following this session, the plenary, so an update on the community work that we're doing, the different community groups that have activated this year. We'll touch on all of that in the next hour. And beyond that, we have the lightning talks today, and then sets of workshops tomorrow and Thursday as well. But beyond that, individually, if you're here, you're poised to be an advocate for IIIF, so helping represent within your institution or your sector, helping answer questions. And if there are things that we can help with, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We help people run local events at their institutions all the time. So IIIF showcase days or training days. We have a lot of open groups I mentioned earlier in this hour. All those community groups are open to absolutely anyone. We also have a Slack group that there'll be a link at the very end where you can join and see some of the updates there. And then at the institutional level, the great next steps are to have staff get familiar with IIIF capabilities and get excited about what it can do and help you do. And one of the best ways to do that is to join the IIIF Consortium, help us support more of those trainings and development events. Also get really connected to the peers around the world who are making the best use of IIIF, joining the newsletter, being involved in that community at that highest level. And of course, exposing collections via IIIF, using lots of different IIIF compatible software. There'd be tons of references to new tools throughout this conference. And then working with, if vendors are some of the main ways that you work with digitized collections, talking to the software suppliers about becoming IIIF compatible. That's a huge part of the work that we do as well, is working with different software asset management providers, collection management providers, all these different organizations that we can talk to them and help them work through IIIF compatibility as well. So this is just a smattering of some of the most active vendors and groups within the IIIF community. these places are seeing the value of IIIF and making it available to their customers and to their end users. This is by no means exhaustive, but just a great view into some of the options that you have available to you. And with that, I will just leave you with this, just to thank you for your interest and your excitement about IIIF. There are thousands of adopters out there in the world, more and more utilities and applications coming online every month. We know of more than 1 billion digital objects that are available using IIIF, and we're hoping that that scale just increases massively over the coming years. And we're really excited for you to be a part of this, just by attending this event, by thinking about how IIIF can serve the needs of your end users, and for your attention here and joining us the rest of this week. So I will leave this this screen up for a few minutes. We have a newsletter that is a great way to find out about kind of the next set of events, the next trainings, the newest implementations, the newest exciting things that are happening regionally in different languages. So IIIF.io/newsletter. We have the Slack group that I mentioned. It's a free and open Slack. That is a great place where people work through technical problems and questions. So bit.ly/IIIF-Slack. And then I urge you to join those open community calls I mentioned. The calendar is available at that top link, IIIF.io/community. And my cat has joined us just in time for questions. I think we have a few minutes here. If there are questions I can answer about anything we've covered here. Otherwise, we will take a short break before the community updates happen at the top of the hour. So I'll leave this screen up for just a few more minutes, but feel free to put questions either in the chat or if we think, if folks want to unmute and ask that way, I'm happy to field questions. So yeah, thank you for joining us at the start of this IIIF Working and Learning meeting. Yeah, and hope to see you at the next set of sessions. Maybe I will stop sharing so that I can see. Put my cat down. What questions can I answer about any of the introductory pieces that we discussed here today? Also can put things in the chat if that's easier for folks. Happy to talk more about any of the community groups that I mentioned or any of the developing technical groups. So there's a question here, it went by a little fast, but is the current state of video with IIIF dependent on the viewer? I'm not sure if I totally understand the question, but basically there are a set of IIIF viewers that can handle audio and visual material. And so basically it's not tied to a single viewer, if that's your question. Maybe Glenn or Caitlin, you could put we have what we call the viewer matrix. So it's part of the cookbook that I mentioned. So yeah, Glenn's put the link in the chat. Thank you, Glenn. So that matrix shows you, basically the cookbook is a set of recipes, which are basically different capabilities that you can accomplish with IIIF. And so each recipe shows you the best practice in terms of accomplishing, one or more of those. And the nice thing about, along with that cookbook, we also have a listing of the different IIIF viewers in the ecosystem that can handle those different recipes. So not every viewer handles every possible interaction, but there are a number of media players. So, this won't be comprehensive, but just off the top of my head, the Universal Viewer, Clover, Mirador, Ramp, Aviary, these are all different media players that can handle IIIF video. So you mentioned that you really like the time code jumping. So again, I don't want to misspeak. I may have missed some of the latest, but I know, for example, that I think Ramp, the Ramp media player, if there are say VTT files as annotations, can support that kind of interaction. I think Aviary is also capable of doing that, but yes, it's a really useful interaction design or interaction pattern. And I'll also say it's actually extremely valuable for accessibility purposes. It really provides a good formal connection to translated to I forget the exact term for it, but right, the text alternatives in that transcript. A great question. Other questions or pieces that I can cover for folks? Is there a place or person? Oh, here we go. They're coming in fast. All right. Is there a place or person to triage either naive or advanced questions, such as where can I find help setting up an annotation server? That is a great question. There is some interest in setting up a group that that talks about annotations and best practices. That isn't formalized yet, but hopefully in the new year, that group would be a great place to talk about that. I would suggest that the Slack channel, the IIIF Slack, has a couple of different places, a couple of different channels where people would be absolutely happy to help give advice. On setting up an annotation server. There's actually presentations about annotation server options later today and later this week. If you can't get on the Slack or you want to just start, you can absolutely email us at staff@iiif.io. Hopefully that helps as a place to start. Here's a question. We have student interns working on IIIF related projects. They're fairly new to both archives and a lot of technical concepts, so the community Slack would be helpful. But are there any specific undergraduate or postgraduate communities they might be able to get involved with? That's a really excellent question. I don't know of specifically like student-led communities. I know that there have been for example, like Showcase in digital humanities and other contexts at universities that have been geared toward student populations, but I don't know if ongoing groups quite like that. What I would suggest is there is an education group, a pedagogy group that is seeking to form. You'll hear more about that at the plenary in the next hour. And I think that group could actually be a really great connecting mechanism to addressing kind of this need. But I might also suggest that some of the training materials and guides that we have published might be useful to student populations. I hope that answered the question, but let me know in the chat if there's anything to clarify. Okay, great. Other questions or suggestions? Shouldn't just be questions. If there are folks in the audience who have suggestions to answer any of these questions, by all means add those as well. One thing I'll mention, maybe just as a preview of the talk, some of the community updates that we'll be going through at the top of the hour. I will say that we are working on some regional trainings. Caitlin Perry will be talking more about this in the next hour, but we are really eager to not just provide more sort of end user and community facing trainings, but also in a broader set of languages. So a lot of the stuff that we've developed initially has been in English, but we have a lot of different languages coming with different workshops and training options in 2024.